Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Nihami and these are the headlines. Israeli warplanes continue to pummel Gaza with more airstrikes as the number of Palestinians killed reaches 213, including 61 children. Over 1,500 have been wounded and nearly 58,000 displaced as Israeli jets destroyed more residential buildings. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces killed another Palestinian and wounded dozens after they opened fire on protesters. Amnesty International says Israeli attacks on Palestinians may amount to war crimes. Pakistan says Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki's participation in the UN General Assembly is being obstructed. Talking to media after arriving in Turkey, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmoud Qureshi said it would be a great injustice if his Palestinian counterpart is not allowed to attend the session. He added Israel's bombing is a blatant violation of human rights laws and Fourth Geneva Convention. At least 57 migrants drowned in a shipwreck off Tunisia as they tried to cross the Mediterranean. The Tunisian Red Crescent said the boat was carrying 90 migrants, of which 33 were rescued. In Pakistan, at least 4 people have died in roof collapse incidents after a dust storm followed by light rain hit parts of Karachi. According to the Met Department, the storm was caused due to local weather conditions and cyclone Tauktae that made landfall in India's Gujarat on Monday. It said Karachi could experience gusty winds again until the cyclone system is out of the region. India has registered a record 4,329 COVID-19 deaths and more than 263,000 infections over the past 24 hours. In Pakistan, 135 people lost their lives to the virus and more than 2,500 tested positive overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.38 million lives and infected over 163 million people so far. And in boxing, a proposed August bout between Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua is thrown into doubt after a U.S. arbitrator ordered Fury to face Deontay Wilder for a third time in September. Fury won the WBC World Heavyweight title from Wilder in a rematch in February 2020. The pair were due to fight again, but delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic prompted Fury to seek an alternative. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. Israel's bombing of Gaza continues for the 9th consecutive day, with 213 Palestinians martyred and nearly 1,400 wounded. Medics say 61 children are also among those killed in Israeli attacks. In its genocidal spree, Israel is targeting health facilities and homes in besieged Gaza, displacing over 58,000 civilians. In the West Bank, nearly 100 people have been wounded as Israeli forces opened fire at mass protests against the Israeli aggression in Gaza. Amnesty International said Israel airstrikes on residential buildings might amount to war crimes. It also condemned U.S. plans to sell weapons to Israel in the midst of assaults on Palestine. Meanwhile, international calls for a ceasefire are continuing to mount. EU foreign ministers are holding a virtual meeting to discuss the latest situation as countries pledge aid for Gaza amid fears of a humanitarian crisis. Pakistan says Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki's participation in the UN General Assembly is being obstructed. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi revealed this while talking to the media after arriving in Turkey.
Pakistan's foreign minister said it would be great injustice if his Palestinian counterpart is not allowed to attend the session. Qureshi said Islamabad and Ankara want to convince the world that it must act to stop Israel's bombing of Palestine. He said Pakistan is in the process of contacting and consulting various countries to stop Israel's aggression. The foreign minister said Muslims in the European Parliament should pressure their leaders to help Palestine. Pakistan's top diplomat said the bombing has cut Palestinians' access to hospitals, food, electricity, and the internet. He said that it will be regrettable if the international community remains silent on the Palestinian issue.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has offered to host the intra-Afghan talks. He was speaking to the Afghan National Security Advisor Hamdullah Mohib on a phone call. Wang said Beijing is willing to create necessary conditions to hold the talks in China. He added Beijing supports an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process. The Chinese Foreign Minister said U.S. decision to pull out has caused uncertainty in Kabul, but he said peace is a general trend and the common aspiration of the international community. A UN General Assembly vote on a draft calling for suspension of arms and ammunition supply to Myanmar has been postponed. Diplomats said the process has been delayed in a bid to win more support. The draft resolution calls on the Myanmar military to end violence and accept the results of the November elections. Meanwhile, pro-democracy activists have taken to the streets in different parts of Mandalay despite heavy presence of security forces. The locals also rallied against the military regime in the country's Sagaing region. More than 800 people have been killed since the military seized power on the 1st of February. India has reported a record 4,329 deaths due to COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The number of cases in the country has also crossed the 25 million mark, with 263,000 testing positive overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.38 million lives and infected 163 million people so far. More in this report.
India has become the second country in the world to have reported 25 million COVID-19 cases after the US. But owing to inadequate testing and lapses in data gathering, the crisis is severely underreported, with many deaths attributed to other causes. The World Health Organization says India now accounts for 50% of daily COVID-19 cases and 30% of daily deaths across the globe. Meanwhile, the capital New Delhi has just 4 days' worth of vaccines left. And India's Medical Association says the country has lost 269 doctors over the past 2 months. The crisis has now penetrated the rural areas, home to nearly 70% of India's 1.3 billion population.
If COVID-19 spreads completely in the villages, then no hospital in India can accommodate them because the rural population is very large and the healthcare is fragile. We have to increase testing in the villages, and if the patients could be identified in the beginning and are provided proper treatment, then the pandemic could be prevented from spreading in rural India.
A new study has found that COVID-19 vaccines tend to alleviate the symptoms of long COVID. Over in Europe, Germany has announced to scrap its vaccine priority list and start offering jabs to all adults from 7 June. Meanwhile, experts worry that Venezuela's low rate of vaccination means it could take up to 10 years to vaccine the population. This comes as the WHO warns that the world has now reached a situation of vaccine apartheid.
I think I would go one step further and say not just that the world is at risk of vaccine apartheid, the world is in vaccine apartheid. As you know, high-income countries account for 15% of the world's population, but have 45% of the world's vaccines. And low and lower middle-income countries account for almost half of the world's population, but have received just 17% of the world's vaccines. So the gap is really huge.
In Japan, a top medical organization has thrown its weight behind calls to cancel the Tokyo Olympics, saying hospitals are already overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Thailand has reported its highest surge in daily deaths since the pandemic began.
At least 4 people have died in roof collapse incidents after a dust storm followed by light rain hit parts of Karachi. The meteorological department says the storm was caused due to local weather conditions and cyclone Tauktae that made a landfall in India's Gujarat on Monday. Temperature in the port city was recorded at 43 degrees centigrade in the afternoon. Residents in some areas also faced power outages. The weather department said Karachi could experience gusty winds again until the cyclone system is out of the region. In India, some 120 people are missing after a vessel adrift off Mumbai's coast sank during cyclone Tauktae. The Indian Navy said 2 ships and helicopters have been deployed to assist the search. Reportedly, the vessel was carrying over 270 people when strong winds sent it adrift. But authorities say Tauktae has now weakened after slamming into the eastern coastal state of Gujarat. India's Met Agency has classified the storm as very severe, with sustained wind speeds of up to 160 kilometers per hour. So far, 27 people have been killed by the havoc wreaked by the storm, while 200,000 have been forced to evacuate. At least 57 migrants drowned in a shipwreck of Tunis as they tried to cross the Mediterranean. The Tunisian Red Crescent said the boat was carrying 90 migrants, of which 33 were rescued. The boat had departed from Libya, a gateway from Europe-bound refugees fleeing poverty and conflict in Africa. Some 300 people have lost their lives in such shipwrecks while trying to reach Europe. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has vowed to restore order in Ceuta after over 6,000 Moroccan migrants swam into the northern African enclave. In a televised address, Sanchez said the sudden influx of migrants swimming into the city is a serious crisis for Europe. He said all illegal migrants will be turned back according to agreements Spain and Morocco signed years ago. His remarks come as Madrid deployed troops at the border with Morocco to stop the flow of illegal migrants. Approximately 2,700 migrants had already been sent back, where they were being accepted under a readmission deal. Russia's lower house has approved a bill that will ban members of the extremist organizations from being elected as lawmakers. Critics say the move is aimed at stopping supporters of jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny from taking part in the polls. Russia is due to hold parliamentary elections in September. The move comes ahead of a trial outlawing Navalny's political network and adding it to a list of extremist organizations. Navalny is serving 2.5 years in jail on old fraud charges he says are politically motivated. The U.S. has expressed concern over the recent military tensions between Armenia and Azerbaijan. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan raised the issue in calls with the Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azeri President Ilham Aliyev. The State Department says Sullivan emphasized that military movements near undemarcated borders are provocative. Sullivan welcomed ongoing communication between the two sides to resolve this issue peacefully. He underscored the need for the two countries to conduct formal talks to demarcate their international border. Sullivan also conveyed a U.S. commitment to peace, security, and prosperity in the South Caucasus. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The International Criminal Court has warned mercenaries and foreign troops in Libya that they could face prosecution for their crimes. Court's chief prosecutor has demanded an end to the detention centers allegedly used for committing crimes in Libya. Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda addressed a virtual meeting of the UN Security Council on Libya. Bensouda said the office has collected credible information and evidence on such criminal activities. She noted crimes committed on Libyan territory may fall under court's jurisdiction, no matter the nationality of the persons involved. Meanwhile, the UK welcomed a prosecutor's foreigners' withdrawal call and endorsed that the court has jurisdiction over this matter. International donors have pledged $340 million to help Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh at a UN-led aid conference in Geneva. The UN Refugee Agency says 36% of its target for the 2021 program has now been funded. Nearly 1 million Rohingya are living in crowded camps in Bangladesh since fleeing a military crackdown in Myanmar's Rakhine state nearly 4 years ago. Others are displaced internally, and a military coup in Myanmar and the subsequent violence is complicating their return. The U.S. Senate has voted to debate on a bill that would provide billions of dollars for technology research to compete with China. Senators voted 86 to 11 to move forward on the Endless Frontier Act, which is the base for the larger China bill. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer called the bill a once-in-a-generation investment in American science and technology. He said the U.S. needs to lead in artificial intelligence, 5G, and quantum computing before China determines rules for this sector. The bill includes $2 billion to boost semiconductor production and research for the auto and defense sector. A group of senators is also working on a measure to include $52 billion for microchips. Other China-related bills are likely to be included in the final package. The European Union has extended sanctions against 8 individuals, including Russians, over their alleged involvement in cyber attacks. The curbs also apply to 4 entities and have been prolonged until the 18th of May 2022. In a statement, Brussels said the sanctions include a travel ban and asset freeze. It said European persons and entities are forbidden from making funds available to those listed. The EU first introduced such sanctions to curb cyber attacks on June 30 last year against Russia, China, and North Korea. The European Union has drafted a new deal to facilitate the entry and residence of highly skilled non-EU workers. The draft deal between the European Parliament and the Council aims to revamp the 2009 Blue Card work permit system. The deal will see the required salary threshold lowered and reduce the minimum duration of a work contract. It also introduces enhanced rights and the possibility to move and work more easily between the member states. The European Parliament and the Council still need to confirm the deal by adopting the new Blue Card scheme. The member states will then have 2 years to implement the measures into national law. In Australia, a surfer has died in a suspected shark attack off a beach on the mid-north coast of New South Wales state. In a statement, police said emergency services were called on Turncurry Beach after reports of the shark attack. The man suffered fatal injuries to his upper right thigh after being attacked while surfing. Authorities have closed the beach and the neighbouring Foster Main Beach. Last year, 8 people were killed in fatal shark attacks across Australia. Now, would you be willing to wash your hands with this French artisan's snail slime soap? You can decide whether or not, but after watching this report.
Foams of slime bubble on Damien Desrocher's hand as he lightly touches one of the thousands of snails he keeps at home. The 28-year-old snail grower started using the gastropod fluid to make soap bars in December 2020. He then sells them locally in the northern French town of Wahagnes. He extracts the slime by tickling the snails, which he says is harmless.
Bien sûr, ouais, tout est dans la dextérité.
It's all in the dexterity of how you tickle. This one here is great snail that I have chosen. Look, I only touch it with my thumb and it foams. You see, it's not violent, it's simple.
To make around 15 100-gram soap bars, Des Rocher uses some 80 grams of snail slime. Since 2 grams of slime can be extracted from one snail, he needs at least 40 snails to produce this amount.
Nous, on travaille sur des savons solides.
We make soap bars through a process that allows us to produce the soaps in low temperatures. So it does not degrade the raw material, which is quite prized and quite delicate. In this material, we can find elements that are naturally present, such as collagen and elastin, which are anti-aging remedies.
Des Rocher is only one of the 3 artisans making the rare hygiene product in France. Although uncommon in Western cosmetics, snail mucus is considered a common ingredient in Korean beauty products.
And other business updates. Pakistan received a record remittances of $2.8 billion in April, 56% higher than the last year. In a tweet, Prime Minister Imran Khan said he always considered overseas Pakistanis the country's biggest asset. Khan said a record $24.2 billion were remitted in the first 10 months of the fiscal year. In a tweet, the State Bank of Pakistan said there was a 29% increase in remittances. It said worker remittances have surpassed the last fiscal year by over $1 billion. Inflows during the July to April period were mainly sourced from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, the UK, and the US. International Monetary Fund's member countries have agreed to clear Sudan's areas to the institution. This was agreed during a conference hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron to kickstart the broader debt relief effort for Sudan. Macron announced the cancellation of Sudan's $5 billion debt to France. He said Paris will also provide Khartoum with a $1.5 billion bridge loan to facilitate external debts. Sudan's foreign ministry said Italy and Germany have also committed to clearing their shares of a total $1.8 billion debt. Norway's ambassador to Sudan said her country would cancel its debt listed at $100 million. Kuwait, who is Sudan's largest creditor by far at $9.8 billion, said it would support debt resolution discussions. Saudi Arabia and China have also announced to reduce and forgive some debt. The Wall Street stocks have edged higher at open after better than expected earnings from the U.S. retail giants Home Depot and Walmart. The S&P 500 index traded marginally higher at open, while Nasdaq Composite was also up nearly 1%. But the Dow Jones Industrial Average Index fell and traded 0.25% lower at open. Meanwhile, the oil prices have climbed as optimism over the reopenings of economies outweighed fears of slower fuel demand in Asia. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.